Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to Step Through the Ropes, Volume 29. After a very short-lived stint in the World Wrestling Federation, the natural Dustin Rhodes entered WCW in early 1991, while his late legendary father, the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, had come in as the booker. Now, Dustin's stint began in early 1991 as at Wrestle War 91, he defeated Nature Boy Buddy Landell in a singles matchup. Dustin then got into his first major program as he was courted by Alexandra York, who eventually became Dustin's wife, believe it or not, to be a member of her York Foundation. Now, I say the York Foundation is one of the worst factions ever. I call them the Yuck Foundation. However, Dustin turned down her offer, and that led up to a program with the computerized man of the 1990s, Terrence Taylor, as they went one-on-one at the first ever Super Brawl pay-per-view, where Dustin Rhodes picked up the victory. A month later, at Clash of the Champions 15, he had a rematch with Taylor, which was marred by interference by bodyguard Mr. Hughes and Ricky Morton, who pretty much gave away that he had was the newest member of the York Foundation, announced later in the show. And Rhodes and Morton did some house shows after that. During the summer of 1991, Rhodes captured his first ever championship at WCW as he joined forces with Big Josh and the Z-Man as they won the World Six-Man Tag Team title from the Fabulous Freebirds and Bad Street. Also, at the Great American Bash pay-per-view, Rhodes joined forces with the Young Pistols, defeating the Freebirds and Bad Street in a six-man elimination matchup. As the fall of 1991 was about to start, Rhodes had a series of matches with stunning Steve Austin for the World Television Championship. Many of their matches ended in time limit draws, and many times Austin would get disqualified or there'd be some kind of chicanery. They fought to a time limit draw at Halloween Havoc 1991, and earlier that day of the pay-per-view, Rhodes and Barry Windham arrived together, and Eric Bischoff tried to talk to them, but the enforcers, Larry Zbyszko and Arn Anderson, slammed the car door on Windham's right hand, and Rhodes chased the enforcers off, and then Rhodes had to drive Windham to the hospital. That was going to lead up to Rhodes and Windham challenging the Enforcers for the World Tag Team Championship at Clash of the Champions 17 a month later. However, Windham unfortunately had reconstructive surgery on that injured hand, which was actually injured before Halloween Havoc at a TV taping when Windham and Rhodes did a tag match against, I forgot who the opponents were. Windham announced he could not wrestle, but introduced Dustin's partner for the matchup, and it turned out to be the returning Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Steamboat and Rhodes had a great match with the Enforcers and ended up winning the World Tag Team Championships from the Enforcers. Anderson and Zbyszko protested the whole thing after losing the belts because they signed to wrestle Rhodes and Windham, not Rhodes and Steamboat. Surprisingly, that may have been the last time Anderson and Zbyszko teamed up. I could be wrong about that, but I'm sure they eventually, Rhodes and Steamboat, they eventually lost the tag team belts in early 1992 to Arn Anderson and the late beautiful Bobby Eaton of the Dangerous Alliance. At Clash of Champions 18 in January of 92, Rhodes and Windham joined forces with Ron Simmons to defeat Anderson, Eaton, and Zbyszko in a six-man tag team matchup. A month later, at Super Brawl 2, Rhodes and Windham defeated Zbyszko and Steve Austin in a tag team match. Then, at Wrestle War 92, Rhodes and Windham joined forces with Steamboat, Sting, and Nikita Koloff, forming Sting Squadron to defeat the entire Dangerous Alliance, Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, Bobby Eaton, and Rick Rude. A month later, at the first ever Beach Blast pay-per-view, Rhodes, Windham, and Koloff defeated Austin, Anderson, and Eaton by disqualification, and the match was actually refereed by Ole Anderson. Rhodes and Windham took part in the NWA World Tag Team title tournament defeating the duos of Anderson and Eaton, Rude and Austin, and in the semifinals defeated Hiroshi Hase and Shinya Hashimoto, all before succumbing to the eventual winners, Steve Dr. Death Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy. From there, Rhodes and Wyndham eventually unseated Williams and Gordy for the Unified World Tag Team Championship, both WCW and NWA Tag Team belts, and also they were hinting some dissension between Wyndham and Rhodes. Wyndham and Rhodes were scheduled to face Williams and Gordy at Halloween Havoc 92, but Gordy, I believe, left the company for some reason, and they ended up wrestling Williams and stunning Steve Austin, who, ironically, his birth name is Stephen Williams. I think he eventually legally changed his name to Steve Austin since then. I don't know if Rhodes and Wyndham won the match or went to a time limit draw, but Rhodes and Wyndham held on to the tag team titles. Also, Dustin was in the first and only King of Cable tournament. In the first round, he was scheduled to wrestle Jake the Snake Roberts. However, Roberts had left the company by the time the match had taken place, and Rhodes actually ended up defeating the Barbarian in the first round, only to lose to Vader in the semifinals. Rhodes and Wyndham finally lose the World Tag Team Championship to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Shane Douglas. And after the match, Rhodes and Wyndham turned on Rhodes, left him laying with a DDT and a superplex, and Rhodes and Wyndham started doing house shows in late 92, early 93. At Starrcade 92, Rhodes was part of the Lethal Lottery, where Rhodes and Vader defeated the Barbarian and Kensuke Sasaki, and were both in the Battle Bowl match later in the show. At Clash of the Champions 22, it was scheduled to be Rhodes, Sting, Ron Simmons, and Van Hammer taking on Barry Windham, Vader, Barbarian, and Paul Orndorff in a Thunder Cage match. However, Van Hammer was reportedly injured. Vader and company did a number on the Barbarian due to his prior association with Cactus Jack. Simmons and Vader got into a brawl before the match took place, and Vader had re-injured Simmons' shoulder, so it wound up mostly Sting and Rhodes in a 3-on-2 Thunder Cage against Vader, Windham, and Orndorff until the newly face-turned Cactus Jack comes to the ring with bolt cutters, enters the cage, and attacks Vader, Windham, and Orndorff, and eventually scores the pinfall, enabling the babyfaces to win the match. Dustin wound up winning a tournament to win the vacant United States Heavyweight Championship with victories over Vinny Vegas, Tony Atlas, and defeating Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Rhodes was scheduled to wrestle Ron Simmons at Super Bowl III for the U.S. title, but Simmons, they said, was still injured, I believe, and Rhodes ended up defeating Max Payne by disqualification to retain the belt. Rhodes then started feuding with Ravishing Rick Rude, who had returned from injury in the spring of 93. Rude was the previous U.S. champion, and he was stripped of the title due to that neck injury he had. Rhodes and Rude had a match on Worldwide Wrestling where both men's shoulders were pinned to the mat, and two referees made a 3 count. One said Rude won, the other one said Rhodes won. And then eventually the U.S. title was vacant again. At the first ever Slamboree, a Legends Reunion pay-per-view, Rhodes joined forces with Kensuke Sasaki in a losing effort to Rude and Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. A month later, Rhodes joined forces with Sting and Davey Boy Smith in a losing effort to Rude, Vader, and Sid Vicious. And it was that very show where Rude, who had taken possession of the U.S. belt by putting it in a briefcase, the WCW management finally managed to get the possession of the belt back. Rhodes and Rude went at it. I think they had an Iron Man match a marathon match at Beach Blast 93, or was it 2 out of 3 falls? I'm not sure. But it was I think tied at 1 fall apiece, and the time ran out, and the title was still vacant. At Clash of the Champions 24, August of 93, Rhodes and his mystery partner, Road Warrior Hawk, defeated Rude and the Equalizer. Not the late Edward Woodward, and certainly not Denzel Washington or Queen Latifah. He was the later became Dave Sullivan. And also Rhodes had a 3-match series with Rude for the vacant U.S. title, which Rude won the first match and Rhodes won the final 2 to win the U.S. title for a second time. At the first ever Fall Brawl pay-per-view, Rhodes joined forces with Sting, Davey Boy Smith, and the Shockmaster. I called him the Jock Itch Master, as they won the War Games match over Sid Vicious, Vader, and Harlem Heat. Rhodes then started working with Stunning Steve Austin again over the U.S. title. Rhodes was victorious at Halloween Havoc 93. At the first and only Battle Bowl pay-per-view, Rhodes joined forces with King of the Colossal Kongs as they defeated the Equalizer and Awesome of the Colossal Kongs. I forgot which one of those Colossal Kongs has since passed away. They were managed under the tutelage of the late Harley Race. At Starrcade 93, Rhodes loses the belt to Steve Austin in a 2 out of 3 falls match in 2 straight falls. Rhodes joined forces. Rhodes had a chance to challenge Lord Steven Regal for the World Television title at Clash of the Champions January 94. The match ended in a time limit draw. Rhodes joined forces with... Was it? I'm sorry, I forgot if he wrestled at the Super Brawl 4. I mean, all apologies if he did or did not. But Rhodes eventually entered a feud with Bunkhouse Buck, who was managed by Colonel Robert Parker. At the first ever Spring Stampede pay-per-view, they had a Bunkhouse match where both men bled badly, and Bunkhouse Buck picked up the win over Dustin Rhodes. A month later at Slamboree 94, Rhodes defeated Buck in a bull rope match. After the matchup, Rhodes was attacked by Terry Funk. A month later, at a Clash with Champions, Rhodes asked Arn Anderson to be his tag team partner to face Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck at Bash at the Beach 1994. And late in the matchup, Anderson turned on Rhodes, enabling Buck and Funk to get the victory. Then on an episode of I believe it was WCW Main Event, I believe Bunkhouse Buck was in the ring having a match. And out came the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And Terry Funk came out, but Dustin stopped Funk. Meng, the bodyguard of Colonel Parker, we wanted to come after Dusty, but a lot of the babyface wrestlers came out to back Dusty up. And after everything settled down, Dusty took the microphone, delivered this awesome promo. And, told Dustin, I know you've signed on the dotted line at the Clash of Champions. And Dusty asked Dustin to be his partner to face, I think it was Buck and Funk at the Clash. And the emotional promo ends with Dusty saying, I don't want a handshake. What I need for you right now is a hug and a kiss to seal the deal, baby. And the two of them hugged, and quite a reaction from the crowd. I mean, at that time, at the moment when Arn Anderson turned on Dustin back then, at that point in time, I figured Dusty was coming back, and I was thrilled. Sure, his comeback didn't last, because at that Clash of Champions, Dusty and Dustin faced Buck and Funk. Say that 3 times fast, folks. Yeah. I think Dusty and Dustin won by disqualification, and Meng, who we know as Haku, he put Dusty in a nerve hold after Dusty broke a chair over Meng's head. It was probably one of those stunt breakaway chairs. And then eventually it led up to Dusty and Dustin and the Nasty Boys defeating Buck, Funk, Arn Anderson, and Colonel Robert Parker himself in the War Games matchup. And Dustin defeated Arn Anderson in a singles match at Halloween Havoc 94. Dustin was not on Starrcade 94, but when 1995 approached, he had another member of Colonel Parker's stud stable to deal with, and that was the Blacktop Bully. For those who don't know, it was Barry Darso, most notable for being Crusher Khrushchev, Demolition Smash, and Repo Man. he was like sitting in the crowd and like starting in the summer of '94, dressed up as a truck driver. And he had this beep beep air horn, and he was like favoring all the heels and stuff. And Colonel Parker, they had bailed him out, a bully out of jail, supposedly. And what happened was Rhodes and Blacktop went at it at Super Brawl 5, where Blacktop was victorious thanks to Colonel Parker. And then they had a rematch at the first ever uncensored pay-per-view in what was called a King of the Road match. Now, my understanding, these two guys, they fought, not in a wrestling ring, they fought on the bed of a moving flat truck. And my understanding was the match was taped earlier the day of the pay-per-view. The match didn't air live. The match was taped the day of the pay-per-view. Both men bled badly. Blacktop Bully was victorious in the matchup. And I think right before that pay-per-view took place, Turner, the higher-ups in Turner Entertainment or the corporate structure at CNN Tower, had instituted a no-blood policy on WCW. And those above Eric Bischoff at the time, they pretty much, I guess, they chewed Bischoff out, and as a result, Bischoff ended up firing both Dustin and Blacktop because of the breaking the no-blood policy. And that was the end of Dustin's time in WCW back then. And later on, 1995, Dustin would return to the WWF as the Bizarre Goldust. So, folks, let me know what you think. The natural Dustin Rhodes' run in WCW from 1991 to 95. I should have mentioned that his dad, Dusty Rhodes, was the booker, did booking no matter who was in charge, whether it was Jim Herd, as I called him, Jim Turd, to Kip Fry, to Cowboy Bill Watts, and to Ole Anderson, who ran the company for a short time, to Eric Bischoff. But let me know what you think, guys. How great was that run, do you think, of the natural Dustin Rhodes in WCW from 1991 to 95?